In this video, I'm going to show how to release an R package to CRAN using this article that shows the guidelines to work with two different workflows, the GitHub workflow and the Gitflow workflow. In this specific video, I'm going to be showing how to do that with the Gitflow workflow. And in that case, there is a few notes that you need to be aware of. This article assumes that you are using the Gitflow extension, which simplifies work with this more complex workflow, automating some of the things that you otherwise would need to remember. And second, that you have to have privileges to push to origin master and origin develop. How the Gitflow workflow works can be found here at this link. You will find there actually this link here that explains the original post, that explains how to actually do it. I'm not going to be covering that today, but if you need to learn about how to do it, then go ahead and do that. Okay, so the very first thing that I would like to show is the repository that we are going to be using for this video. So it's called Mauro Lepore Release Workflow. It's a toy package. It doesn't have anything useful in it, but it represents the situation that I'm trying to explain. When we have in our package and we want to release it to CRAN. Here is a note that mentions that I usually use a bunch of aliases to do the kind of work that I'm about to do. I'm not going to be using my aliases here, but you're welcome to go and use them if you want. Okay, so the first thing we usually do is we run this function in the use this package called use release issue. So that will, let's go to our terminal here. So what I'm going to do is pop up R. Maybe I'm going to show you first the log of this package. So because this is a demo, it doesn't have a bunch of commits. It has a simple one commit that added the infrastructure that I'm about to release or pretend that I'm going to release. Because I'm using the Gitflow workflow, every commit to master has a tag. So this is the 000 tag. And develop right now is pointed to the same commit because we haven't done anything yet. But in a real scenario, usually there is a bunch of commits above master. And we're gonna do that in a moment when we walk through the release issue that I was mentioning a moment ago. So let's start R and let's paste the code that comes from here. We're gonna call use release issue. And a note on this function is that it requires a specific Git setup. You need to have your origin pointing to the source repository and not to your fork. So let's paste that code there. So by running that function, we are asked to choose one of the versions that we want to use for this release. And here we're going to be pretending that we want to release v001. So the one that we choose here could be associated to the number 3. That's what I'm going to type here. And it's thinking a little bit. It's going to create a new GitHub issue on the release workflow repository. And it's going to add a bunch of items in the form of a checklist that we would need to work through before we submit the package to CRAN. Let me go back to the article and maybe start getting ready for the next step. So the next step, in a moment you will see the GitHub issue popping up here on my browser. And the next step is going to be to create a feature branch, something like prepare v001, because that is the branch is going to contain any change that results from walking through this release issue that we have just created. As you can see, my browser now has a new tab. That is the one that was created by calling the function use release issue. This is a URL, but the URL was automatically opened as I was speaking before. So as you can see, there is a bunch of items here. So the blog post that we are using mentions what we need to do with that checklist. Basically, what we need to do is to follow that checklist all the way until the end of the section prepare for release. And there's a few tweaks that you may want to explore. Also, let's see this note. Okay, so here I mentioned the feature/branch. A feature branch is something that has a special meaning in the Gitflow workflow, but it doesn't have any special meaning in the GitHub workflow, because in the GitHub workflow, the only special branch is master. Any other branch are equal between themselves. Let's create a branch called something like prepare v001. I'm going to copy that code from here. So because I am using the Gitflow workflow, and as I said before, I recommend using the Gitflow command line application. So I would do a Gitflow init first. In this case, we get asked a few questions. To choose the name of the master branch, I'm going to call it master. To choose the name of develop, I'm going to call it develop. The prefixes for features, for bug fixes, for release issues, for release branches, and for hot fixes and support. So everything here is fine with me. So we're ready to start. So what I'm going to do is Gitflow. I'm going to do a feature start, and I'm going to call it prepare v001. So the command line application did a couple of things for me, created a branch and checked it out. And it's also giving us a guideline for what we need to do once we are done with that branch. So we are still here. We already created that feature branch that we were discussing a moment ago, and now we would go to the release checklist and complete all the steps and all the way until the end of prepare for release, all the way until here. This is quite time consuming, and it's the first time, and I'm not gonna do all of that, but let's run at least this one here to pretend that we are going to walk through all of that. All those changes, I usually accumulate them in this single branch called prepare v001. So now I would start R, paste that code over there. In reality, I use aliases, as I said before, to do a bunch of things that are listed in that checklist, but I'm not going to show that today. It might be a little distracting. So that function created a file that is called CRAN comments. It should now be in my staging area. You can see it there. And also changed the r-build-ignore file to add the show the diff to add the line that tells R to ignore the file CRAN comments when the package is built. Okay, so now I would maybe create a commit. Let's add everything here. Add CRAN comments, and if I show you the log, you can see now that the feature branch prepare v001 is one commit ahead of develop, also one commit ahead of master. So that thing I can check, and I could continue doing all these items in the checklist and continue adding commits. Maybe for an example, let's do a proofread title. Okay, let's go that, and let's do the title, what this package does. Let's delete everything here, a demo, and the description same here. Let's delete everything, demo. That will be my package. Another commit, proofread description. Now we have a couple of commits. So that is how it goes. So you could continue checking all these boxes all the way to here. Now let's go back to the blog post. Now we ask ourselves this question: did anything change? When we walk through that checklist, when we did all this here. So in this case, the answer is a trivial yes. Of course, we added CRAN comments, and we did a few things. So that means that so we edited the description file. So that means that the package is still not ready for release. We need to incorporate those changes that we have added to the branch develop. So we're going to do that by merging the feature branch, and then when we are done with that, we are going to go back and continue doing the exact same thing, kind of repeat the same process until no change is added. So let me show you how that goes. So now we would do Gitflow. Instead of say feature start, now we say feature finish, right? And that will create a merge commit into develop. As you can see, the branch was merged into develop. The branch has also been deleted now locally, and I changed to develop. So one thing that you will notice if I show you the log is that develop is now merged into that previous branch. The branch is gone, but the changes are incorporated in develop. But the origin develop is behind. So here is where I would do a push, so that both the origin and the local repo are in sync. Here is the what I'm showing you now. So that also is again a note that reminds you that you need access to push commits to origin develop. If you don't, the Git, you can do that more like with vanilla Git, and things get quite complicated. So in my experience, this workflow to release an R package to CRAN is the simplest, the one that uses the Gitflow app to automate a bunch of things, so you can move quickly into these kind of bookkeeping tasks that are not super interesting. But for that tool to work well, you do need access to push to commits to master and to develop, which usually are restricted. Okay, so the post, we have merged this, right? And then the next step would be to go back to the checklist and repeat the process. So if I checked all these boxes in the first pass, and we added some change as we did before, the blog post says that what we need to do is to merge those changes into develop, and then go back to this checklist and kind of do this kind of quickly again. At least not everything, but at least the few steps that are crucial. Like for example, if you already added a CRAN comments file, you don't need to add it again. I mean, it won't make any sense. But if you do it again, then there won't be any change. So that's why the blog says that if going through these steps again produces no new change, then you are ready to release. Usually what I do is I may proofread title and description a couple of times, because sometimes in the first pass I may miss something. I also may check URLs a couple of times because it's quite cheap to do. There is a little function that does a great job in finding problems with the URLs. I also run this one here, DevTools check with remote equals true and manual equals true. Because that is a good check that nothing really changed since the last. If all these checks pass in the first pass through this checklist, I may not repeat the last two, which are kind of time consuming, but this one here is the cheapest and quite informative. So I could do this one. So basically, the section or the subsection here, prepare for release, is the one that I would go over like a second time, and not doing all these checks, but mostly the first three. These would be the ones that I will be focusing on if I already passed through the one once and added some change. But there is a point where repeating these steps on and on won't make any change, and then is when we could answer to this question, no. So when we say to ourselves, did anything change? Then at some point the answer is going to be no, the package is ready for release. So in that case, you could have been, so in this case I'm already on develop, but if you created usually what you could do is you create a feature branch to accumulate those changes. But if you already did a pass and that very likely no change will be added, you could start working from develop and not create any commit. And if you do see a commit, only then you create a branch to host that commit. So basically, the situation when you reach, when you say no, the package is ready for release, could be something similar to what we have here now. Where you are already on develop, and if you do a git status, you get a clean staging area. So that also means that you are ready to create a release branch. We could do Gitflow release, and let's call it V001, V001, and we have to say start. What that does is what creates the branch and then moves us into that branch, and then it reminds us that we have to bump the version right now and start committing changes, and also tell us what to do when we finish. But also the blog post will tell us the next step. So the next step is to increment the version number to a release version number, not to a develop version number. If I show you the description file, you will see that there's a 9000 ending here because this is in development package. But with this function, oops, what did we just do? With this function use version, what we do is we pump the patch, we're going to say 3 here, and we are now asked to confirm if we want to commit, because this function actually does the commit for us too. Let's say for sure, and now let's quit. So if I show you what changed, the last commit, what it did is, bump this version to 1. All right, so that is meeting this one step. Now what we need to do is submit a pull request based on master and confirm that the continuous integration services are passing cleanly. Let's do it just that. Create. Oh, sorry, here I forgot to base it on master. Create. Let's base it on master because I'm using the Gitflow workflow. My default branch is develop. So if I create a branch, if I create a pull request, it's going to be based on, it's going to be merged into develop. But now we want to merge it into master. So the base should be master. Okay, let's do just that. That will create the release branch. I'm happy with everything. So I'm going to hit enter, enter, enter. Here is the URL to my pull request. And if I scroll down, you'll see that continuous integration workflows are working there. So, I wouldn't, merge or do anything before that, passes with green. But if we go to the post, we can start seeing what's the next step. And the next step is to run DevTools submit CRAN. And that's a little scary, but it shouldn't. That function actually won't submit the package to CRAN unless we confirm an email that we get from CRAN after we run that function. So even before the continuous integration workflow finishes, I'm going to actually run that function or pretend that I run it. I won't, because that function will upload something to CRAN, and even if I don't approve the email, it could be using some resources that I don't want to, because this is just a demo. So pretend that I run that function, then the state of the world after running that function would be that the function creates an artifact that is called a file that is called CRAN release. So your staging area would look something like this, where there is this new file that it still doesn't know anything about. So what I do is just remove that file because it's not useful to me. So I just remove CRAN release, and then my staging area is clean again. Right. So I would still wait for this continuous integration workflow to finish and pass on green. And then the issue here tells us that regardless of, then when that passes with green, then we will be asked to, we have to actually accept the email that CRAN sent us to confirm that we actually do want to submit the package to CRAN. So here we are tempted to hit merge, but I won't. Instead, I'm gonna do it from the terminal. And so here we go. Merge the release branch into master, check out master, and then use CRAN release to create a new tag and a corresponding GitHub release. So I've discovered that if I do use the the Gitflow workflow, and I'm using the Gitflow command line application, then the way to do that is to do Gitflow release finish, and Gitflow will merge the will do everything for me. We'll merge the branch into develop, into master, and we'll create a tag. So now with the tag, it's very specific. What we do here, we enter the same the tag as with the format v001. So vxyz basically is the format of the tag. Let's close that. Save that too. And now we get a summary of the actions that the Gitflow command line application did. So the release branch was released. The release branch was merged into master. The release was tagged with v001, and the format is very important there for something I'm going to explain in a moment. The tag was back merged into develop, and then the release branch was deleted locally and also from the remote origin, and we are now back on develop. So there is a bunch of things that the Gitflow app did for us, which is cool because we don't have to think about that, and we'll very likely forget to do some of those steps at some point. So here is where again I say you need to have permission to push commits to your origin master and origin develop, because we have effectively done the release, but the release is for now just local. So you need to be able to push that to your remote. But before we do that, let's do run R, and let's go back to the post. So the next step is, so we already merged the release branch into master, check out master, and run use GitHub release. So this function is pretty cool because actually, one thing that I didn't do yet is to check out master. Git check out master, as the blog says, and only now we run R and run this function. So this function is pretty cool because it helps us create a GitHub release, and it also adds a tag. The tag that it adds is exactly a tag with the format v xyz. So that's why before, when I kind of typed the tag, I used the exact same format so that we don't end up with two different tags pointing to the exact same commit. So here it is telling me that because I'm using the Gitflow workflow, the default branch is not master, it is develop, and it's just warning me of that. I'm okay with that. Yes, I am. So now it is the point where we want to tag that master tag and create a GitHub release for it. So I'm going to say yes. 3 error, master branch is ahead. Okay, so it looks like I need to first push master and also develop as I'm here, and then I'm going to repeat what I wanted to do before. So run R and run use GitHub release. Now everything should be in sync locally and in the remote origin, so I expect that aspect to be just fine. Are you sure that you want to create a release on master even when it's not your default branch? Yes, number 2 here. Okay, so that is working, and we are also prompted to do the following. So once we get to that browser page, we click to edit the draft and then publish release. So that's what we're gonna do. We click here to edit the draft, scroll down, and publish release. So that's what we need to do. and the release is already published. That's it. Let's go back to our issue. Okay, so creating release, very good. And now if you're using the Gitflow workflow, ensure that the release branch is also merged into develop. So that happened automatically when we work from the terminal. And at this point, we need to check out develop. So okay, let's do just that. So we were in master. Let's check develop. Let's confirm that everything worked just fine. So master and origin master are both in sync, and master has this V001 tag that is what defines a release in the Gitflow workflow. Also develop is also has kind of merged that tag, which is great, and it's also updated. It's in sync with origin develop, and we are now standing there. The head is exactly there. Okay, so it looks like we are good to continue. At this point, the next thing to do is to increment the version number to a development version number. So let's do just that. We paste this, we just use the version, forgot one parent here. And we are asked to confirm if we want to commit that change. We say yes. And if I show you what changed with the git show, here it is. Now we are using version 0.01 9000. That is the change that we have just accomplished, and that is it. So now we can continue the development, and then CRAN will take a little while to accept or reject. So if CRAN accepts, then the submission will have a corresponding release on on CRAN that corresponds to the new tag on master, and if they reject it, then that's fine. I mean, we will have still a tag on master, still a GitHub release that is like an internal release. It just won't have the corresponding release on CRAN. And then when we learn why it was rejected, we will incorporate those changes into develop and then continue working towards the following release. So yeah, with that, I just walked you through this workflow to release an R package to CRAN. And in this particular video, I used the Gitflow workflow. Thank you.